Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Raymond. When my wife told me she decided to go on a solo vacation for an entire month in our 9th year of marriage, that became the point at which I knew I should do something about her new selfish attitude. Over a year ago, my wife, Diana, started changing in ways I never saw coming. It was subtle at first. I tried to adapt and be understanding. After all, people grow and change, right? But what started as minor adjustments slowly escalated into something I barely recognized. Diana had been working as a project coordinator at a mid-sized firm that handles international logistics for 3 years. She seemed content with the job, never complained about it more than anyone complains about work, and we had built our budget around both of our incomes. That changed one morning when she told me over breakfast that she was quitting. Her reason was that the job was affecting her mental health, and she needed to prioritize her well-being. I'll be honest, this caught me completely off guard. Diana had never mentioned being particularly stressed about work. We'd never had conversations about her job negatively impacting her mental state. Sure, she had busy periods like everyone else, but nothing that seemed overwhelming or unmanageable. Still, mental health isn't something you argue with. If your spouse tells you they need to step away from work for their psychological well-being, you support them. That's what marriage is supposed to be about. So I told her I supported her decision, and we'd figure out the financial adjustment together. The plan, as I understood it, was that Diana would take some time to decompress, maybe look for a less stressful position, or perhaps explore a career change. What I didn't expect was for her to treat this like an extended vacation with no end date in sight. Within 2 weeks of leaving her job, Diana had settled into a routine that revolved entirely around what she wanted to do each day. She could call this her self-care era. She'd wake up when she felt like it, spend hours on social media, take long walks, meet friends for coffee in the afternoon, or drive to the mall to browse stores. There was no job searching, no exploring new career paths, no discussion about when she might return to work. Meanwhile, I maintained my regular schedule. Up at 6:30, at the office by 8 o'clock, home around 6:30 in the evening. The difference was that increasingly, I was coming home to an empty house. The first few times, I didn't think much of it. Diana would text that she was out with her friend Hannah, or having dinner with Bella, or meeting Margaret for drinks. Normal social activities. But as weeks turned into months, these outings became more frequent and longer in duration. I'd arrive home to find a note on the kitchen counter or receive a text message sent an hour earlier explaining that she was out and wasn't sure when she'd be back. When I'd call to check in, she'd always have an explanation of how they lost track of time when they decided to catch a movie or found a new restaurant to try. The explanations were always reasonable on their own. It was the pattern that started bothering me. 3 nights a week became 4, then 5. What used to be afternoon coffee dates stretched into evening dinners, then late-night activities. Weekends, which we used to spend together, became times when Diana had plans that didn't include me. About 3 months into this new routine, I realized I was spending more evenings alone than with my wife. I was coming home to an empty house more often than not, preparing and eating dinner by myself, and going to bed without knowing when she'd return. This wasn't the supportive recovery period from work stress that I had envisioned. This was something else entirely. The conversation I finally initiated about my discomfort didn't go the way I hoped it would. I approached it carefully, trying not to sound controlling or unsupportive. I explained that while I wanted her to have time with friends and space to recover from work stress, I was feeling disconnected from her. I missed spending time together. I missed having a predictable routine as a couple. Diana's response was immediate and defensive. She asked if I was against her sanity and independence. She wanted to know if I expected her to sit at home all day just because I preferred it that way. She questioned whether I understood how important it was for her to maintain her friendships and her sense of self outside of our marriage. The way she framed it made me sound like the unreasonable one, like I was being possessive or controlling by wanting to spend time with my own wife. To her, many women do not take care of themselves, and she is prioritizing herself at the moment. So I backed down. I told her I understood and that I just wanted us to find a balance that worked for both of us. But instead of finding balance, things got worse. After that conversation, Diana seemed to interpret my concerns as attempts to limit her freedom, and she responded by asserting even more independence. She started making plans without mentioning them to me at all. She'd leave the house in the morning, and I wouldn't hear from her until late evening, with no explanation of where she'd been or what she'd done. The woman I had married, who used to check in throughout the day with quick texts or calls, who used to plan weekend activities with me, who used to consider my schedule when making her own plans, was gone. In her place was someone who seemed to view our marriage as something that shouldn't interfere with her personal desires and social life. I found myself living with a roommate who happened to share my last name, rather than with a partner who shared my life. The next couple of months became months of increasing distance. Diana's behavior patterns became more pronounced and more frequent. She would leave the house in the morning without saying where she was going, spend the entire day out, and return home after I'd already gone to bed. Weekend trips with friends became a regular occurrence. Shopping excursions that lasted entire days became routine. Her complete lack of consideration for how her choices affected me gave me cause for concern. She never asked if I had plans before making her own. She never checked if we had any commitments as a couple before scheduling activities. She never even mentioned what she was doing until after she'd already committed to doing it. The financial strain was becoming noticeable, too. Without Diana's income, I was covering all our household expenses alone. But Diana's spending hadn't decreased to reflect our reduced income. Credit card statements showed regular charges at restaurants, retail stores, gas stations, for trips I knew nothing about, and entertainment venues I'd never been to with her. When I tried to bring up the budget concerns, Diana dismissed them by saying she deserved to enjoy herself after years of working stress. She pointed out that the amounts she was spending weren't unreasonable, and that I was being financially controlling by questioning her purchases. Every attempt I made to address any aspect of our changing relationship was met with accusations that I was being controlling, unsupportive, or threatened by her independence. The conversations became so predictably defensive on her part that I eventually stopped trying to have them. I soon realized I had unconsciously started withdrawing emotionally. I stopped asking about her plans. I stopped waiting up when she was out late. I stopped suggesting activities we could do together because I'd learned to expect her to have other priorities. I started making my own plans without considering her schedule, since she clearly wasn't considering mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. Diana had accused me of wanting to limit her independence, but her pursuit of total independence had effectively ended our interdependence as a married couple. We were two people sharing living expenses, nothing more. Then came that Tuesday evening in October when Diana made her announcement about the solo vacation. She'd been sitting at her laptop when I walked in from work, and without any preamble, she informed me that she'd been researching wellness retreats and had decided she needed to take a month-long solo trip to a spa resort in the Caribbean. She wasn't asking for my thoughts. She was informing me of a decision she'd already made. The trip was scheduled for November, and she'd already looked into booking arrangements. My immediate internal reaction was a mixture of anger and hurt because this felt like the ultimate expression of her disregard for our marriage. It felt like she was so eager to get away from our life together that she was willing to spend an entire month away. Instead of expressing any of those emotions, I looked at her and said, "That's perfect timing." Diana clearly expected resistance. She had prepared arguments about self-care and personal growth and the importance of solo experiences. My calm acceptance of her plan seemed to throw her off balance. She asked if I was sure I was okay with it, and seemed almost disappointed that there wasn't going to be a fight about it. I assured her that I thought the timing worked out well, and that she should absolutely take the time she felt she needed. What I didn't tell her was that perfect timing referred to something entirely different than what she was thinking. The next morning, after Diana left for one of her regular outings, I made a phone call to her best friend, Hannah. Hannah and Diana had been close since college, and if anyone would have insight into Diana's recent behavior changes, it would be her. The conversation with Hannah was enlightening in ways I hadn't expected. When I described Diana's pattern of behavior over the past 6 months, Hannah was genuinely surprised. She told me that she had observed my wife's changes over a while now, but thought it was some we decided as a couple. Hannah had known Diana for over a decade, and I was thinking this change was somehow influenced by my wife's best friend, but I found out this wasn't exactly the case. More importantly, Hannah revealed that she hadn't actually seen Diana nearly as much as Diana had been claiming. While Diana had told me she was with Hannah multiple times per week, Hannah said they'd only gotten together a handful of times since April. This meant Diana had been lying to me about where she was spending her time. The question of what she was actually doing during all those hours away from home took on a much more serious dimension. I told Hannah about the planned month-long solo vacation, and Hannah's shock was genuine. She couldn't understand why Diana would want to take such an extended trip alone, especially given the financial impact on our household. Hannah agreed that Diana's behavior seemed out of character and concerning. Then I told Hannah something out of anger. I explained that I had reached a breaking point with Diana's behavior, and that if she followed through with leaving for a month-long solo vacation, she should understand that she would not be returning to the same marriage she was leaving. In fact, if she left the house for a month, she would cease being my wife. Diana was free to make whatever choices she wanted to make, but she should make them with full awareness of what those choices would mean for our marriage. Hannah promised to have a conversation with Diana, but I didn't care what the outcome would be because it's clear my wife has been up to something. That same afternoon, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney who had been recommended by a colleague. I'd never thought I would be sitting in a divorce lawyer's office, but Diana's behavior had made it clear that our marriage was heading toward an end, whether through my choice or hers. The attorney was thorough and practical. He explained the divorce process, the typical timeline for our state, and what I could expect in terms of asset division and ongoing financial obligations. More importantly, he gave me specific advice about steps I could take to better document and organize my financial situation. The following day, I met with an accountant to discuss the financial strategies the attorney had mentioned. He walked me through the process of better organizing my financial records and understanding what documentation would be important to maintain going forward. Both men emphasized that these protective measures were simply smart financial practices that any married person should consider. Better organization and documentation of assets, clearer understanding of financial rights and obligations, and proper structuring of accounts weren't about planning for divorce. They were about being financially responsible. I left both meetings with clear guidance and began implementing their suggestions over the following weeks. Better financial organization became my priority. Account statements were properly filed. Asset ownership was reviewed and documented. Insurance policies were examined and updated where appropriate. By noon that same day, Diana was calling me while I was at work to say that she'd decided not to take the solo vacation after all. She claimed it had just been an idea she'd been exploring, nothing concrete, and that she'd rather focus on things at home anyway. Her sudden reversal confirmed that her friend told my warning. Maybe the vacation wasn't about self-care or personal growth. It might probably be about testing boundaries and asserting control. When she realized there would be real consequences for her choice, the vacation suddenly became unimportant to her. But Diana's cancellation of the trip didn't change my perspective on our marriage. She had shown me exactly how she viewed our relationship and her obligations as a spouse. The fact that she backed down when faced with consequences didn't erase months of selfish behavior and disregard for our partnership. So I continued with the emotional withdrawal that had begun months earlier. I was polite but distant. I maintained my own schedule and activities without consulting her or including her. I stopped trying to engage her in conversations about our relationship or our future. I treated her with the same level of consideration she had shown me, which was minimal. Diana clearly expected that canceling the vacation would reset our relationship dynamic. When that didn't happen, when I didn't return to my previous level of attention and engagement, she became confused and then concerned. Over the next few weeks, she made various attempts to regain my focus. She would try to initiate conversations about her day, suggest activities we could do together, or bring up topics she thought would interest me. My responses were polite but brief. I wasn't hostile or rude, but I also wasn't engaged in the way I had been throughout our marriage. During this time, I continued implementing the financial organization recommendations from the attorney and accountant. By December, I had created a comprehensive organizational framework that would serve me well regardless of what direction our marriage ultimately took. Diana's behavior during these months showed some improvement. She was spending more time at home, going out less frequently, and making more effort to include me in her plans. But I could tell these changes were motivated by anxiety about our relationship rather than genuine recognition of how her previous behavior had been problematic. After trying to get the old version of me for months and failing, Diana finally asked directly if I was planning to divorce her. She had clearly been building up to this conversation for a while, and I could see how much anxiety the uncertainty was causing her. I told her the truth. I explained that I loved her and wasn't actively pursuing a divorce, but that I also wasn't going to continue in a marriage where I felt taken for granted and disregarded. I made clear that her behavior over the past several months had been selfish and inconsiderate, and that unless she was willing to make genuine changes to how she approached our relationship, I couldn't see a positive future for us. Diana's response surprised me. Instead of becoming defensive as she had in previous conversations, she acknowledged that her behavior had been problematic. She admitted that she had gotten caught up in her newfound freedom after leaving her job and had lost sight of how her choices were affecting me and our marriage. She agreed that we should pursue couples counseling, and she committed to making concrete changes in how she prioritized our relationship versus her individual desires. It took us several weeks to find a therapist who was accepting new patients and specialized in helping couples navigate major relationship challenges. We eventually began seeing one doctor who came highly recommended. The counseling sessions were productive. Diana demonstrated a genuine effort to understand my perspective and to modify her behavior accordingly. She began looking for part-time work to contribute financially to our household. She started including me in her social plans and made our time together a priority again. She stopped making unilateral decisions about major expenditures or time commitments. By March, our relationship had improved significantly. The daily tension that had characterized the previous year was gone. We were communicating more effectively and spending quality time together regularly. Diana seemed to have genuinely learned from the crisis our marriage had gone through. But throughout this period of reconciliation and improvement, I never abandoned the financial organization and planning I had established during the difficult months of our relationship. Diana never knew about these background plans, and I never felt the need to discuss them with her. Our day-to-day relationship had improved dramatically, and I was genuinely happy with the progress we'd made. But I had learned an important lesson about the difference between love and preparation. I loved Diana, and I was committed to making our marriage work. But I was no longer unprepared for possibilities I hoped would never occur. My financial preparation wasn't a sign that I expected our marriage to fail. It was a sign that I had learned the importance of being properly prepared for any major life change. This preparation gave me peace of mind that allowed me to invest emotionally in our relationship without anxiety about potential future challenges. Now, our marriage is in a good place. We spend regular time together and communicate openly about our needs and expectations. But I never forgot the lesson from that period of our marriage. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, you should believe them. Diana showed me that under the right circumstances, she was capable of being completely selfish and disregarding our marriage commitments. She also showed me that she was capable of recognizing her mistakes and making genuine changes when the stakes became clear to her. Both of these things are true about her, and both informed how I approached rebuilding our relationship. My financial preparation, established during our crisis, remains in place today. Diana has never needed to know, because she's not behaving in ways that threaten our partnership. But if she ever does, if she ever again decides that her desires are more important than our marriage commitments, I will never again find myself unprepared to end the marriage. Some people might view this as overly cautious or untrusting. I view it as wisdom gained through experience. You can be fully invested in your marriage while also being properly organized and prepared for whatever the future might bring. The month-long solo vacation that Diana announced but never took became the catalyst for the most important strategic thinking of my adult life. It taught me that sometimes the threat of losing something valuable is exactly what's needed to make people recognize its worth. It also taught me that protecting yourself isn't the same as giving up on your relationship. Today, I will say that I love my wife and I'm committed to our marriage, even though I never got to know the actual catalyst for that selfish change. But I can honestly say that if she ever again chooses to prioritize herself over our partnership, I'm prepared for that reality in ways I wasn't before. That combination of emotional investment and practical preparation has given me a level of peace and confidence in our relationship that I never had during our first 9 years of marriage. Sometimes the best way to save something is to be fully prepared to lose it.